Welcome to Breaking Par with Bernard Sheridan, the golf podcast that interviews the best and brightest minds in the golf industry. Now, here's your host, Bernard Sheridan.
Eric, thanks so much for being on the show today and joining us here at Breaking Par.
Yeah, Bernie, thanks for having me, man.
It's my pleasure. So we were talking a lot of bit, actually, before we went on the air. Mm-hmm. And I've been following you for quite a while. I think we've been following each other on social media. And I've always had a ton of respect for you. You're a real bright young guy. So it's an absolute pleasure to have you here. So give us the audience out there a idea of, or I don't want to say an idea of, where you started. I mean, like, how did you get involved in golf? And once you did, what made you decide to go on the path that you did?
Yeah, so first of all, thanks for saying that. I appreciate the kind words. So I started playing golf probably when I was maybe 11 or 12, so reasonably young, playing with my dad, and played my way, played other sports growing up, baseball, basketball, my whole life, up until I got to about high school. And then I got to the point where I was playing basically just golf from about 16, so my sophomore year of high school all the way till I was finished. Had some reasonable success locally. Ended up playing in school and college at Lehigh, close hereby. Mm-hmm. And then I got into working in the business. At that point in time, I was still playing competitively and had the naive mindset that I was good enough to continue playing, which I quickly realized wasn't the case, but we'll get to that. And so I started working at a course, picking balls in a range when I was 15, and kind of worked my way up through the course, through school, just to make money on the side. I think I gave my first lesson in about 2008. And I, at that point in time, wanted to just teach to kind of make money on the side. I made, $7 picking balls, and these guys are making 40, 50, 60 bucks teaching. I thought, well, okay, I want to give that a shot. And I started teaching, and I was real bad at it. It was brutal in the beginning, and it me being super competitive and reasonably good at things I worked at my whole life, it was kind of a shock to be really that bad at something right off the bat. And I don't think I'm downplaying that. I think it was that bad. It was bad. So from that point on, I kind of couldn't understand, well, how can I hit the ball so easily, but I can't get this person to do it. So I started at that point. It was about 2008. Studying golf swings and trying to find information. And, here we are, 2016. It's going to be 8 years now, still basically doing the same thing. Definitely have dug a lot deeper since day one, but almost feels like, I'm almost in the same spot where we're just scratching the surface with stuff. And there's so much to learn and know in what we do. And, so yeah, it's been a process since then. Like I said, I played in college a little bit, and I realized that me playing professionally was probably not going to be a way that was going to pay the bills. So I got out of that and didn't really want to get a real job out of school, and was deep into the teaching stuff. So I sort of just rolled right into that, and have been doing that ever since.
So I see too that you seem like you're very passionate about what you do, and I see that you work with a lot of different players and different age groups. Where exactly are you working out of right now, and how did you end up there?
Yeah, so I live in the Lehigh Valley in Pennsylvania, which is roughly, as you know, but some of the listeners don't, roughly about an hour northwest of Philadelphia.
Yeah.
So I live now and teach out of the Bethlehem Golf Club, which is in Bethlehem, Pennsylvania, which is about 10 minutes from my hometown that I grew up in. So I teach and coach now out of the same place that I was picking balls at when I was 16.
Nice.
So I haven't moved a whole lot, kind of sort of the same group of people, kind of found a spot that really fits me well. So I've been here ever since.
Yeah. So, and how is it right now?
Yeah,
I'm not going to rub it in. So look, by the time this show airs, it'll all have melted anyway.
Yeah,
so. So
2.5 feet.
2.5 feet of snow right over the past weekend.
Yeah.
So we're taping this. Today is, let's take a look. Today is January 25th, and Pennsylvania was one of the areas that got pounded. I must admit that I'm kind of glad I'm not there right now, but I've been through my fair share of winters up there. That's for sure. So 57 of them. So and hopefully I won't have to go through any more of them. But it'll all be winter down here in the Naples area. But I know that when it is like that, you still continue to work with your students. So how do you do that?
Yeah, so we are very, very lucky that we have an indoor facility called Infinity Golf, which is located in Phillipsburg, New Jersey, which is 15 to 20 minutes from where we are. As you know, as we talked a little bit before, it's a huge indoor facility. There's hitting stalls. There's a relatively large, about 25, 30-yard chipping area. There's a bunker, putting areas, simulators in the back. Have the TrackMan coming this month, which we're excited about. So it's super. I'm super fortunate to be able to have a place to work at over there at Infinity.
Yeah, so I mean, I know that in that area and up north, there's a lot of instructors who either don't do anything all winter at all. They just kind of pack everything up and do nothing and collect unemployment. Unless they're entrepreneurs, then they're just not making any income. Or they head south and come down here either to Florida or somewhere that's warmer, maybe Texas or California or Arizona, and they'll go there for the winter and they'll spend their winter there, and then they'll spend their on season up north. So they go back and forth. It's got to be, I always thought, really difficult to do that, especially if you have a family that you're attached to. In other words, if you have a wife or kids or things like that, because let's admit it, as golf instructors, we make a nice living, but we're not rich by any means, and we really can't be jet setting around the country. and it costs money to stay someplace else all winter, and then still maintain what you have as your home base. So that's not that easy of a proposition to do. And then if you are spending money on technology and things like that, that's eating a hole in your pocket too, because it takes time to pay that stuff off. So you mentioned TrackMan. Is that the technology that you have on the way now? And if it is, at this point, what technology have you been using up to that point?
So we have, I guess I want to touch base on the point you made before. I've always flirted with the idea of going back and forth to Florida, Arizona, and I guess kind of haven't had the, I don't know what term I could use here, the family jewels, if you will, to actually pull the trigger and do something like that. And I'm lucky enough to have enough high school and college kids that go year round to sort of stay in one spot. It is a difficult proposition. So with the technology, we have a flight scope. The course that I work at owns a flight scope.
Okay.
And we've had that for maybe 3 or 4 years now.
Mm-hmm.
So we've been using that for a while. I've back and forth on Swing Catalyst and Sam Putt Lab, which I think you guys have.
Yeah, we have both of those. Yes.
So I'm getting ready to. I want to pull the trigger. My bank account doesn't want me to pull the trigger.
Yeah, it's a big trigger. That's why. Yeah, it's a big trigger.
With how I set up my coaching and how I spend my time, for me, the TrackMan makes a lot more sense because I'm very aware of and want to pay a lot of attention to what the golf ball itself does. That's just how I do it. Everyone does it a little different.
Mm-hmm.
So for me, that was kind of the most important thing. I think the flight scope, based on the unit we had and everything, gave me pretty good information on what the club was doing. But from time to time, the ball information maybe wasn't as accurate, consistent. Right, that I wanted it to be. So the TrackMan basically solves that problem. So that's something we're going to utilize a lot this year.
Yeah. So are you going with a TrackMan 4 or a TrackMan 3?
Yeah, we got the 4.
Okay. Yeah. So and that's going to track the club for you too. So that's a dual radar. That's what we have down here. It's what you'll find is if you use it inside, the numbers for the club is going to be a little bit different than it is outside. We're still trying to figure out why, because that'll show you swing bottom, but it's essentially it can be off by, and this is just what we've discovered since we've gotten it, like maybe an inch or 2 inches in essentially when it's inside. Now, I'm not sure whether it's because it's the proximity that the unit is to the club, and it's kind of can misread it a little bit, and when it's outside, it can be a little bit further away from it. So I'm not sure whether it's that. We're still trying to figure that out. I'm not sure.
Yeah.
And with the ball too, it's just a hair different. You don't get the exact same numbers inside that you do outside. But that's because the ball's stopping it however the distance is that you have it from the unit. So, or wherever the net is that you're hitting it into. For us, it's about, I want to say 25 feet. 25 to 30 feet from where they hit the ball and then it hits the net. So what they have you do is they have you put a little silver dot on the ball, and that helps the radar track the ball spin better.
Yeah.
For some reason. I don't know whether it reflects off of it better or it catches a point and then it sees that spinning point, and then that's how it catches it better.
Yeah.
So, but great unit. Awesome unit, great way to keep track of things of what people are doing and how they are executing the stuff. So you said you have a lot of junior players, and I know that when I see a lot of posts that you put out there on Facebook, you're sharing with a lot of the people in the groups that you're in. I'm in a lot of these same groups that are other golf professionals. Information about drills that you do with your clients and practice regimes and things like that. And I think that a lot of that information is great, and I think our audience would love to hear about some of that. So give us a little bit of insight into how you started to come up with some of these things, and what made you decide to go the way that you do with the practice regime that you have your students do.
Yeah, cool. So I guess as a background for it, when I first started teaching, and for the next couple of years, I do what everyone else does, which is you studied swing theories and swing mechanics almost 100%, and then you more or less test those things out on the people that come in, right?
Sure.
You figure out what works pretty good for most people, and then you change that a little bit for the next guy, and that's kind of what we do, and it works pretty good. Like, I pretty quickly could get just about everyone hitting the ball pretty well on the driving range. They would come in and X, Y, and Z, and you see enough swings, you know what I mean? We can put 2 and 2 together and get someone to hit it pretty good, and that was cool in the beginning. That was sort of step one. Like I said, when I first started, it was bad to the point where I couldn't get people to hit it better. And then, evolved into being able to hit it better on the range. But then we got to the point where they would hit it good, they'd leave, they'd come back, we'd do the same thing. They'd hit it good, they'd leave, they'd come back. And it was sort of, my lessons got very monotonous. We were doing the same things over. And in my mind, I was having success because what they came for was to hit it better when they were with me in my mind.
Sure.
So that's what I was giving. They were paying me to hit it better. I fixed things, and it was all good. But then, as you go, that gets old quick, and I wanted to do more than that, not just spend my all of my time, fixing swings for an hour that I knew were going to break down and come back to the same thing. So I realized that I had no idea how to get people to really take that and transform it into the course. So started spending a lot of time studying guys like Dr. Erickson, Robert Bjorg, Fran Pirozzolo, guys like that, and studying deliberate practice. Spent some time talking with guys like Matthew Cook from Game Like Training and Adam Young and Michael Hebron and motor learning specialists, and studying skill acquisition models and how do people get better at things. And through doing that, realized that the way I was coaching people to golf was really not at all in line with how human beings learn things at all. So I had to sort of take a step back and really look at what I was doing and how I was doing it, and realize that I needed to change some things up for the betterment of golfers. And so I started probably spending a lot more time doing that in the practice stuff maybe 3 years ago, and have been evolving that ever since, and diving deeper, meeting new people and learning some new things and testing out theories. And the more and more I get into that, the more I realize that really the success that I'm having with my players, is 99% player, 1% me, right? It's has very little to do with what I'm doing, but the guys and golfers that I have that are willing to practice with desirable difficulties and right at the edge of their ability level and challenge point theory and things like that, where it's a little uglier when they're with me, we kind of push them a little beyond their limit. I'm not going after making them look good during that 1 hour anymore. I'm going after the long-term learning aspect. And those are the people that when I really track them, it's pretty easy for me to test skills at an intro level, and then sort of over time really see them getting better in tournaments or in their club championship or in actual playing editions, where before my judge was they hit it better when they were with me, but they would go and a month later we're at the same spot. Now I'm having less immediate performance in front of me, so it's a little uglier to the viewer, which is always funny when people come and watch me teach. That's always an interesting aspect of it, but it's a little uglier on purpose so that 1 month, 2 month, 3 months, 6 month, a year, they really have learned those things and can put it into a different environment.
Sure. So how are you using that information for them to translate it to the golf course, to play? Because I know that, I see all different kinds of ways that people practice. I mean, a good example is I used to have a guy, and you might even know the guy because he's from Pennsylvania. And I think that anybody who's in the golf business probably knows this guy. I'm not going to name his name, okay? He knows who I'm talking about. He probably doesn't even listen to the show. So I just kind of, because he basically wore a divot into my short game area when I had my indoor facility in Pennsylvania. And I used to say to him, dude, can't you hit from a different spot? I said, and so he's the type of person that will go to the range, pick a range mat, and that's his mat, that's his area, and he'll hit like one club, like a 7-iron or an 8-iron, for an hour and a half straight. The same shot, the same distance, the same club. Trying to, and what I think he's trying to do, and I may be incorrect about this, but he's trying to get that shot perfect, get that motion perfect, ingrain that motion. Now, the thing is, though, when he goes and he plays, okay, and when he posts his scores, he doesn't get any better. And he keeps going back and doing the same thing. And I've watched this guy do the same thing for 10 years, and I really haven't seen his handicap drop in 10 years. So what that tells me is that when we see people practicing on the range, hitting the same club over and over and over and over again, and I'm sure that some of the people listening out there, usually the ones that they hit are like a 7-iron, a wedge, and a driver. And they'll take 3 clubs. They'll take their whole bag to the range, and they'll hit 3 clubs, and they'll hit 100 balls with 3 clubs, and probably 70 of them are drivers. And thinking that, well, if I can just hit it farther, and if I can just hit it straighter off the tee, then I'm going to play better. And then you see the guys who are hitting the same club maybe once or twice, and then they put it back in their bag, and then they hit another club. Or they're trying to shape shots, or they're trying to hit it low, or they're trying to play around in their head, or and then they might go and work on short game for an hour, and instead of dropping a ball in one spot, they might go around the entire green and drop balls at all different spots if they have that opportunity to do that, and then hit different shots from that and different lie angles and things like that. So that's more what I find is more of like a put you in a scenario like you're going to be on a golf course, because I don't know anybody who hits the same shot twice in a row on a golf course. And if they do, it wasn't a good shot the first one. So now they have to hit another one because they hit it out of bounds or they hit whatever. So when you're doing a lot of these things, is a lot of the stuff that you put together for these guys and gals, or is it mostly random type things, random practice and different type things, or and how much are they working on each one of those aspects, and how often do they have the same club in their hand?
Yeah, so this is a big passion of mine that we could literally spend hours talking about, you and I. But I guess to go over the sort of surface of everything, what you just described was a perfect summary of why the golfing public in general scores how they do. Well, I should preface that with the golfing public who actually practices.
Right.
In that, I mean, if you took any other sport you would play, the idea that you would go to a range and practice the way we practice in golf is just ridiculous. I mean, that would be like, to me, if you were a basketball player and you picked one place on the court and you just shot that shot and you went to play pickup basketball.
Yeah, I mean, all you do is just hit foul shots all day. Right. Just take foul shots. That's it. Or just do a layup. Just do a layup, do a layup, do a layup, do a layup, do a layup.
Play well in a pickup basketball game.
Yeah.
Like if you were a soccer player and you kicked a ball from just one spot, then you got to run up and down the field and dribble. If you were a baseball player and you just hit a fastball in one location, all of those circumstances, you would never, ever, ever get better. Tennis player, anything, we can go on and on and on. So the fact that we do it in golf, which there's a lot of reasons why we do that in golf, which is a separate conversation, it isn't building skills. And the idea that you said of hitting different shots and different scenarios, I think the bottom line of all of it, and what I'm trying to do, is make it as game-like as possible. So when we look at skill acquisition models, and a lot of this comes from Matthew Cook and game-like training. I think a lot of him, I don't know if you have had him on here.
I haven't yet, and I want to.
Yeah.
A lot of the guy, I wanted to get Adam Young on too, and
awesome.
And Adam said, look, I would love to get on the show, but I think my biggest problem would be if I try to do a Skype, it's my web connection that I have where I am is terrible. He said, so unfortunately, I can't do that. So what I'm hoping is that someday when he's like maybe comes to the PGA show or is in the States, that's when I'll grab him and say, hey, look, you got an internet connection. Let's do this.
Yeah.
Because you got such great information to share with the world. And if there's a way that I can get it to my audience, I would greatly appreciate them being on the show. So it's not that easy to nail these guys down sometimes.
No.
Scheduling just doesn't work or things like that. So, but and I've been known to change, like, my standard is to tape on Mondays, because most of us in this industry have off on Monday. I used to have off on Monday. I don't have off on Monday anymore. But that's why I do it in the evening. And because pretty much everybody has off on a Monday evening in this business, at least. And that's when I can kind of say, okay. But if they say, look, Monday's no good for me, how about Thursday? Then I try to clear my schedule as long as I have enough time ahead of time. And then we record the episode just like we are now, and then it gets released in anywhere from 5 to 8 weeks.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And I think let's get Matthew Cook hooked up with you too. I think that your audience would benefit a lot from him speaking a little bit, deeper in some of the stuff I'm going to talk about. But going back to the practice stuff, so here's how I've found that it works best through a little bit of trial and error is when I first introduce someone to this style of practice, I always have to do a little bit of selling, right? I have to give a little spiel as to, because again, these are people that have come in, have had a problem with their swing that I've had them, right? I'm talking 7-iron, white flag, boom, 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 and they're hitting it good. I'm happy, they're happy. So they have that in their head of this positive experience before. Now I'm saying, hey, wait a minute, let's ugly this up a little bit. So once we get past that phase of things, I'm going to have them in a game with a score, in a game-like scenario as quickly as possible. That's step one. So I sort of, when I started doing this, and guys like James Siekman, who sort of introduced me to start at block, then go random, then go game. So we sort of phase it in that scenario. And that makes sense to me. Can you do the baseline skill? Can you do it kind of random? Then can you do it with consequences, basically? And that makes sense.
Yeah.
The problem that I've run into with that is that when I start with block, so can you do this baseline skill? It's not always a one-to-one to the actual performance. What I mean by that is some guys can't, let's use putting, can't start the ball online perfectly every time, or their speed isn't great. But when I test their make percentage, they make the right amount of putts. When I test their two-putt, they make it. So their individual skills might not be as pretty as I want them to be, but at the end, when it actually counts, they can do what they need to do.
They get the ball in the hole.
So what I ended up doing is when I started block, then random, then game, I would start changing things based on their block performance, because that's just what I thought, and it would affect their actual game performance. So we basically just flipped that model and said, hey, start game. So if a 3 foot, whatever, 5 feet from the hole, you got to make X amount. If you can make X amount, I don't care how you do it as long as you make them. Now, if you can't, and there's a blatant, you're pushing everything way to the right, and my aim is whatever, then you kind of pull them back out, go into a block setting, still in a game format. We'll talk in a minute about the levels and scoring that I think is important, and then shift back into the game. So I always push someone into a game. I'll make the game appropriate to their skill level, and I'll give them a scoring system where they can work their way up or down a level. That's sort of the beauty of, I think, what Matt and I are working on is making these games and levels with everything. So if you come in and you say, hey, I need to work on my chipping, whether you're an 80 shooter, 90s, 100, just beginning, or a tour pro, basically you need the same skill sets, just to different varying degrees. And you can make a game and say, hey, you need to get up and down this percentage of the time or get this close to the hole. If you do it X amount, you move up a level. If you don't, you move down a level. Stuff like that, where you're like constantly, going back to right on the edge of your ability level, where it's just hard enough where it's kind of ugly, but it's, you're learning.
It's always a challenge. It's always a constant challenge. So, and that's what I think what everybody loves about golf who plays golf, and that's what gets them hooked, is that it's every time you're doing to go play, there's some kind of challenge that's involved, depending upon what happens. Some days feel a little easier than others, but still, there's still that challenge. And then when they do feel easier, you're challenging yourself to go lower. So kind of what you're doing is making it very much like what it's like out there when you're doing these types of things.
Exactly. That's the idea, at least, behind it. Like you said, and that's a perfect example. When you practice, how do you know if you're getting better at a skill, like actually genuinely getting better at a skill, or you're just having a good day? Or how do you know if you're getting worse or you're just on a bad part of a performance? Well, the answer is if you have things in levels with scores, that tells the telltale sign. Because you might just have a day where you chip great and you go boom, level 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, or chip bad and do the opposite. But over a period of time, if you have the right sort of skills tests and games, that takes care of that, if you will. That's a great point.
Yeah, I mean, and I think that that if players always challenge themselves, and I think that a lot of players, they don't think of themselves as that good. I get players who are like, oh no, I'm not, I don't want to be like. You'll have certain players who go like, well, I'm not trying to be a tour. I'm not trying to make the tour or anything. Well, you should be. We know you're not. Okay,
Yeah.
there's only an elite few, and some of the best players I know won't even have a. I will watch them hit balls and be in awe. And I've seen a lot of people hit balls, and I will be like, holy moly, this is amazing. I mean, I had a 14-year-old kid in there today who was swinging a 7-iron at 90 miles an hour and carrying it 175 yards, and he's 14.
That's
And I'm
pretty
like,
tough.
this is great. I love watching this kind of stuff. Now,
Yeah.
is this kid going to make the tour? Well, you know what? He's 14, so he might have a chance if he keeps going the way he is. He's not that far behind what a tour pro is doing. I mean, a tour pro is swinging it a 7-iron at 95 miles an hour. This is a kid who's 5'10", weighs about 130 pounds, and is absolutely murdering the ball. And it's just some amazing stuff. But there are other people, too, that are not murdering the ball, but they should still want to try to do the best they possibly can and not put a ceiling on what their limits are going to be. Because you don't know what your limit is until you try.
No doubt. I think the thing, though, too, right, is when we kind of equate it to things for you and I outside of golf, right, we recognize that no one likes to look stupid, and everyone likes to be comfortable and look good, and I get that, right? That's, if I go and do something I'm not incredible at, which there's a lot of things I'm not incredible at.
That makes two of us.
I don't want to look stupid, or out of place or out of my comfort zone either, but since we do this and we study and we recognize that you need to get out of your comfort zone, you need to do those things to actually get better, it's easier for us to sit here and sort of recommend that for people. I think it's important for us at the same time, and we do, you and I recognize that the person on the other side of that might not have studied that like we do, and they don't want to feel uncomfortable. So it's always an interesting mixing and matching of sort of those, because listen, there is some validity behind hitting the same shot over and hitting it good and getting confidence, right? There's validity to that.
Yeah.
But the question then becomes, okay, how often we have them interleaving practice where they're hitting a different club every time, different lie? How often do you do that? And how often do you do the other one? And I don't know what the answer is to that. I think it's so dependent on the person, but it's always an interesting mix.
Well, I always used to say to this one guy who we spoke about a little bit earlier, who would be constantly hitting like an 8-iron. I would say to him, dude, like, you don't need to carry all those clubs with you. You can just go play around with your 8-iron. I mean, like, you'll probably play a lot better. I mean, you won't hit it as far, but it'll be right on the mark. You're never going to be in the rough. I mean, what the heck? I mean, and the funny thing about it, too, is when you think about that, I mean, a quick little story here I'll let you in on. So when I first started, I played at a little 9-hole dirt track called Flowertown Country Club, and in Pennsylvania, and it was a George Fazio layout, and in the 50s George Fazio was the pro there, and it was an 18-hole course at that time, and I want to say somewhere around 1952 a developer came in and offered them to buy half the golf course. So what they did was they said, well, we're not going to sell you half the golf course. And this is George Fazio talking. He says, we'll sell you 6 holes, right? So he sells them 6 holes, and the guy builds a development on these 6 holes, and they put a fence up. And George then takes the other 12 holes and makes them into 9 and rebuilds the whole course and puts 2 sets of tees. So now it's 18 holes around twice.
Okay.
And the holes played totally different the first time around from the second time around because the tee boxes were staggered. They weren't like back further they were like back further and then like maybe 10 yards to the left or whatever. And they took out trees and they carved it in. And so when I would go there, I would try to work on all different types of things. And I would but to get back to that story of not hitting it too far. So at that club, there was a member there who was his name was Henry. And Henry was 96 years old. And God bless Henry's probably gone by now, because this is well over 10, 12 years ago. It was more than that. It was actually probably, my God, I'm going to date myself now. Probably 18 years ago at least. Just feels like 12. So essentially, he said to me, Bern, I got this great story for you. I'm like, what's that? He said, you know where the 6th tee is? And I go, yeah. He goes, I watched Ben Hogan hit balls to a kid out on the middle of the 6th fairway. He said, and he would hit 6 irons out there, and he would tell the kid to go 3 feet this way, and it would one hop and land in the shag bag. And I'm like, you're kidding me. And he said, no, this is the honest to God's truth. Now, this guy, and he was so cool, and we were talking about this a little earlier, how I respect people who were that age, and because there's so much knowledge to be gained from them. Oh. So he used to play golf, God bless him, at that age, 9 holes, 3 days a week, and he would walk. And the guy could not hit a ball more than 150 yards, okay? And he was a 2 handicap.
Get the hell out.
A 2. And here's what he would do. He would hit it on a rope 150 yards off the tee, and then he would get down there and he'd pull out his 3-wood, and he'd hit it another 150 yards on a rope, and then he'd pitch it onto the green within like 6 feet, and he'd 1-putt. And he'd go to the next hole. So, I mean, like, you could do that with an 8-iron. I mean, there's guys who hit 8-irons 150, 160 yards, you know? So, I mean, if that's what your favorite club is, then go out there and just try. I mean, like, I used to say to my students, here's what I want you to do. I want you to take all the odd clubs out of your bag and go play a round of golf and see what you score. Then then put all the odd clubs back and take all the even clubs out and go out and see what you shoot. And I bet you shoot the same or better, because you're going to have to manufacture shots and you're going to learn more shots, because you're in a situation with the club now and you have to take something off it or juice it. And it's going to force you to put yourself under pressure, and it's going to force you to challenge yourself. And when you challenge yourself and step out of your comfort zone, you may fail, but you're going to learn from that failure. And the next time you do it, you're going to try to do it better. And the next time you do it, if you fail again, you're going to get a little bit better and a little bit better, until finally you get to a point where you're not afraid to fail anymore, because you know that the world is not going to stop and end, and your ego is not going to be totally crushed. And if it is, if you can't laugh at yourself when your ego is crushed, then what the heck is the sense? Life is too short to not take it all in stride and not worry about what the heck's going on. So when these guys get out there and they do that stuff, like what you're having them do, it's taking them out of their comfort zone, and that's really what's making them play better, right?
No doubt. And I think the idea of going out to the course and playing with less clubs than you have in your full bag has got to be one of the best. You know, I spend a lot of time trying to come up with these fancy, games and stuff for people to play. And a lot of it's fluff after a while, right? It all comes back to the same sort of principles. And no matter what I do on course, man, one of the best things that I always come back to in terms of effectively getting people to lower their scores is going out on the course and playing with less clubs. And funny enough, the 8-iron, which might have been the same guy I'm talking about, which is funny.
It probably is. He's everywhere. Everybody in the business in Pennsylvania knows who the guy is. I won't say his name. I'll tell you his name after we're off the air. I don't want to embarrass him. And he probably would go like, yeah, that's right. I don't care. So everybody knows that, that's who I am, and I don't care. And I'm going to beat you. And then 9 out of 10 times he doesn't. But at least he in his mind, he thinks he's going to.
Well, and you know what? I had plenty of guys like that too. What I would do is give them exactly what you said, and I'd say, okay, well, if you're going to hit balls with just that 8-iron on the range, then what we're going to do is we're going to go out and play. You're going to get your driver, that 8-iron, and a putter, and you have to learn then with that club to hit all the different shots. So it's the only 3 clubs you can use, and then I would give them a set score. I started doing this last year, so I would say, okay, what do you normally score? I score 38 for 9 holes. Well, if you shoot every stroke you shoot above 40, then we're adding a club to your practice. So they go out and play, and he's struggling. They say, okay, well, you shot 44, so now you got to start practicing with not only an 8, but a 7, 6, 5, and a pitching wedge. And he'd go replay, and if he went under 40, he got all those clubs then to go play with next time. So he has the 8, 7, 6, 5, 4 pitching wedge. And then each time he scores under 40, I can take a club back out so he can go back to what he likes. Things like that you can do where you can kind of, trick people out of their own practice habits. But it is, man. It's getting out of your comfort zone. It's making things as random as possible in practice, because what you get on the golf course is random as possible. I always give people an example like that. Like think about the shots you get on the course. You might be on the fifth hole during a round. Okay, let's imagine you have a chip shot on the fifth hole. You have had a tee shot before that. Mm-hmm. You hit a second shot with whatever club. You didn't know you were going to hit the chip shot beforehand. You now have to make the putt after you hit it. You might be playing with other people. You have a score so far after 4 holes. It might be raining. There's a group behind you that's rushing you. The group in front's way ahead. There's so many variables involved with you hitting that one chip shot on that fifth hole, that to think in practice, if you drop 10 balls down from the same spot and hit it to the hole, that's simulating that chip shot is so far off base, it's ridiculous. So getting as close as possible to all those variables mixed in, and simulating that, I think, is one of the big keys. Matthew Cook with Game Like Training talks about 3 pillars, which are recreating, simulating, and regulating, which basically just means you need to recreate the environment, simulate the thought process, and then keep track of things in order to have deliberate practice and your brain chunk the information. So, there's a lot of scientific research, a lot of theory behind the things we're trying to do. But at the end of the day, it's the application, right? It's the what parts of the theory actually work and how to mix and match the pieces.
And well, really too, as you're doing this, not only are your students learning, but you as an instructor are learning which one of those things work better for your students, and you're both learning from each other. And I think that a lot of students think that they only learn from us as instructors, but what they don't realize is that we learn from them also every single day, and how to better help them, and also when we see how certain people do certain things, we can look at that and see it in a different light than maybe we would if we only worked with the same people all the time, or we were just trying to figure it out for ourselves.
Yeah, I mean, we are, I think, constantly evolving as much, if not more, than the students. That's a great point. It's day to day things are changing. Absolutely.
Oh, I definitely believe that. I know that we were, before we went on, you were talking about how when you start, and I think it was even when we were on, that you were talking about how you started and you felt like, you really weren't getting anywhere and you weren't making a lot of progress and things like that. And I know I can tell you so many guys that I know in the business, and will say to me, like, the first 3 years that I taught, I wish I could call those people back up and give them their money back, because I really messed them up. Because I just didn't know what the heck I was doing. But you know what? There's so many. It's just part of the experience. So, but what I would say to them was, well, you probably weren't making as much money back then, or you probably weren't charging as much either. So it's not like you were charging them as much as you are now, that you have the experience, and now you're probably not messing people up anymore. So now you don't feel as bad. But when you were in that situation, and this is a good rule for people who are students, to understand that you can pay somebody $60 an hour to take a golf lesson, and you can pay somebody $175 to take a golf lesson, and you can pay somebody $250 to take a golf lesson. Now, you have to make the decision as to which one of those people you're learning more from. You might be learning more from the guy who's $60 an hour than you are from the guy who's $225. But it might take you longer to progress and get better. Whereas the guy who's $225, he might get you to where you want to go in a shorter period of time. The bottom line there is, and what I try to tell my students is, either way, you're going to pay somebody a certain amount of money to get better. It depends on how quickly you want to get it. And usually the guys who charge more, can demand more because they get results faster. So that's why, and so it ends up that the guys who can't charge as much, it takes them longer to get results. As they start to get results better and quickly, then they say, hey, maybe I should raise my rates here because I'm getting the job done really quick, and these guys are leaving, and because they're happy with what they got, and I could be making more money at this. So, and of course, I think that anybody who's a golf instructor, their main motivation is to help others, not monetary. At least all the guys that I meet and all the gals that I meet, money is not their main motivation. Helping others and being passionate about the game and being in a position to be able to teach the game to others is really a blessing, and they know that. And the money comes second. And if you're good at what you do, then you get more of it. And you help more people too, and you touch more lives, and it goes around. But I think too that, like I said, some people that I'm sure you deal with this all the time. There's some people who come to you and might go, "Oh, that's a lot of money for a golf lesson." And with them I say, I say what I just said. You can pay. You're going to pay the same amount over a course of time. And you can try it and see how you like it. And if you don't, I'll admit I'm not going to give you your money back, but a lawyer isn't going to give you your money back either, and neither is a doctor. If you don't like a doctor, he's not going to give you your money back because you didn't like him or because he didn't do it the way you wanted him to do it. You're just going to say, see you later, and you're going to go see somebody else and hope that they help you. But if they're doing things like you're doing, then you have to be helping people. That's for sure. So before we go, I just, because there's so much. I could sit here and talk to you for and I already have. We talked for almost an hour before we went on, and now we're in 48 minutes. And usually the show is a half hour, but I don't care because it's my show, so I can make it go as long as I want. Right? So I'm going to keep going. But I saw you post a thing the other day on, you had some juniors at the indoor facility, and it was like a chipping, a putting thing, and they had to do certain things, and if they didn't do that, then they had to do something else that was more difficult, and if they did do it, then they would get something that was equal or maybe not as tough to do. So give me an example of that. And then I think that everybody knows how that translates into the game. If you hit a great shot, you're going to have an easier shot the next one. If you hit a bad shot, you're going to have a tougher shot the next one. But what was the scenario? And here's the other thing too. Are they competing against themselves, or are they competing against each other, or are they competing against themselves and each other at the same time?
Good question. So I want to quickly touch on the price point thing you said before, and I'll go into that.
Okay.
Is that I think that's a huge point, and I'm even to the point now with people where after you do an initial evaluation, my minimum you do is 3 months. So you're paying a lot of money right up front, right off the bat. I think that's a huge point. Like you said, you pay less, but you'll end up paying more over time if you go with the lesser option. I think that was a very important point you made. So to the practice thing, I've been testing. So basically we're interleaving practice. So you hit one shot from one station, one shot from the next, and your result in each station or category affects the shot at the next station. So we break it down into 4 categories. There's a driving task, an approach task, a short game task, and a putting task. So in the driving game, I think in that particular instance, it was just centered contact. So they're going to hit 9 drives. You hit a drive. So each category has its own game with its own scoring system. Okay. And then there's a total scoring system at the end. So for the driving, it was centered contact, which was, again, this is January, very simple stuff. If you hit the middle of the club face, you get a point. If you miss the center, you get 0 points. So very basic.
Okay.
Now, the addition to it, and what makes it more game-like you brought up, was If you do well on the first task, which we define as hitting the center of the face, you then get an easier
Second task
shot. Exactly.
for your iron shot.
For your iron. So while each category has their own scores, and you track that individually in your notebook, but there's also leaderboards for that. So against yourself and against each other, it's important because there's a total score. So even if you're, and then the iron game. So if you got the good drive, you get to hit a short iron. If you had a bad drive, you hit a long iron. And then you take that same theory and recycle it and say, if you hit a good shot with the iron, you get an easier chip. If you hit a bad shot, you get a harder chip. So, I mean, that is super game-like. I mean, the hard part with that is, and why I think you can't do that all the time, is logistically it's very difficult for people to do that. Easy for us with the facility, but most people very difficult.
Yeah.
And you're sort of bang for your buck time-wise. I mean, you hit, in an hour, they're hitting far less shots than in another circumstance. But man, over time, if you can mix that in your practice, the what you get back for that is huge.
Yeah.
Is huge.
Yeah, well, there's a saying when I'm an old guy, so there's a saying when I was a young guy, and it was less is more sometimes.
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
And I'm sure they're still using that saying, but I mean, you may not be hitting. I say that all the time with students. Don't buy 100 balls, buy 50 balls, and take your time. Just don't beat balls. Think about all the time that you have downtime in between shots on a golf course. There's a lot of time. Now, all of a sudden, if you're used to bang, 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 then you get out on the golf course, you can't do that. So now you're getting fidgety, you're out of your element, your tempo is off, your timing is off, it throws your whole game off. Then you get frustrated, and as soon as you get frustrated in this game, unless you're Tiger Woods, and he's not playing anymore, but unless you're Tiger Woods, the frustration does not help you in the next shot. It usually hinders you in the next shot. There are a select few who do better because they got frustrated and they got it out of their system and they moved to the next shot. But they are few and far between.
Yeah, and I think if I can make one recommendation practice-wise, I'd love to talk, like you said before, we could just keep this rolling. But the big thing is the consequence part of it, right? Is making it game-like as possible, simulating the environment, but there has to be some meat to it. There has to be juice there. There has to be a reason for, and if people could introduce that even a little bit, those sort of things will transfer to the course much, much, much more effective. And I tell my guys all the time, going back to the less is more, we don't have as much time like we used to play and practice. So when I practice, I hit 25 or 30 balls, and that includes me warming up. And I get just as much done in that period of time as I used to hitting 300 balls. I mean, and 25, 30 balls. So it's there's no doubt it's about what you're doing and the purpose and how you do it, not the million shots. That's another great point you made.
Yeah, I mean, I've always felt that way. I think that if you practice more like you play, then you'll play more like you practice.
No doubt. And listen, I think when I say this stuff, some people because it's so far on one end for some people, if you're going to do a drive task and you're topping it or hitting it 40 yards right or hooking it 80 yards left, you have to remove yourself and work on mechanics too, right? I don't want it to sound
That's right.
You got to make it game-like, but you also have to have baseline skills. So
Exactly.
There's got to be,
Yeah, there has to be a happy medium. I mean, and work on your baseline skills. I know that a lot of times for us at Impact Zone, there are several drills that we have students do to work on baseline skills without a ball. They're not even hitting ball. There's no balls in the equation. The ball is, I always say to them, the ball is the piece of candy, and you got it. And to quote Pink Floyd, you can't have any pudding unless you eat your meat. You got to eat your meat if you want to have pudding. So essentially what I say to them is, I need you to make a 4-inch swing bottom before you can hit a ball. So, and if you can eat your meat, make your drill, get your 4-inch swing bottom happening, in front of that ball, then you can hit a ball and see if that swing bottom is still in the same spot. I guarantee it's not going to be. It's probably going to be 3 inches ahead of the ball now, or maybe 2, because you're going to have a ball bound factor. But point being here is, now that you do that, if it's not 4 inches ahead, now you got to no more balls until you do it without a ball. Then you can get the reward again. So you got to challenge yourself, and if you do it that way, you can essentially practice for an hour and maybe hit 20 balls. And now, and that's a lot cheaper to do it that way too. If you're going to a public range buying balls, I mean, what the heck? You could just use shag balls that you found and hit them into the range, and not that I want to do anything to stop ranges from making money, because I want them to make money, but because they serve their purpose. And it's important for people to have that. I have people down here all the time saying to me, you know what, there's not enough public ranges around here. Where can I practice? I don't even know where to go. Everything is private. And it's so they absolutely suit their purpose. But what I'm trying to say to people here is, you don't have to spend a ton of money to get better at this game when you're practicing.
Yeah, and one quick point here too with that is, I firmly believe if you had an hour time slot, you can driver, irons, chipping and putting, and get really good work done in your whole game in that point. And I think as we study skill acquisition more, it's not about 2 hours one day a week. It's about 15, 20, 30 minutes day after day after day after day after day. So more frequent sessions, shorter time period. Those skills are gonna long-term learning much better.
Right. So and I totally agree with you on that point. And what I use as a metaphor in that is, I always say that I use a sculptor. And so if you take a person who's a sculptor and they're sculpting marble or granite, okay, they don't take giant chunks off of it. They just don't do that. They chip little tiny pieces until it starts to make its form. And then it takes time. And then after they chip those tiny pieces, then they start to sand them down and smooth them out and make them more precise. And that's the way golf kind of is. You have to do a little bit each day. Don't digest it in one big chunk, because you're not going to get any better if you do that. A little bit each day, and always put a little bit of time aside. It's not that tough to put 15 minutes aside every day. If you just say to yourself, okay, every day after dinner, I'm going to go out back and I'm going to do my line drill. Or every day I'm going to chip, and then the next day I'm going to set up a net in my backyard and hit my drives and spray a little bit of powder on the face and see if I'm making center contact. Things like that totally change what they do. So before we go, because we're just about winding into an hour now, I think we could do another one. I'm probably going to have you back, I think.
I'm in,
so,
man.
Because I think that would be great. But what I would like to ask you to do for us, if possible, is to send me one of these little practice things that you do with your students, and I want to post it on the page that your show is going to be on, so that people can see what a brilliant mind you have, and they can take advantage of that. And then when they realize that, they can actually get in contact with you and pick your brain more, and maybe even have the opportunity to come out and see you if they're in the Pennsylvania area. So if they are, what is the best way for them to contact you, just to pick your brain, ask you questions? And then what is the best way for them to contact you if they want to work directly with you in person?
Yeah, so again, I appreciate those words. And I after talking about the Edgify, I realized that I'm remarkably not good with my my presence online. But I have a website. It's my initials, ecgolfcoaching.com. And my email address and information on there. I post a lot of content on Facebook. So that's probably where I'm at the most. If people can connect with me on Facebook, just search my name and send me a message. And I'd love to talk shop with anybody, regarding anything golf. This has been awesome. And I'll definitely send you some practice stuff.
That'd be great, because we'll put it up on the page, and then people will start to understand when we have guys like you out there who are really diving into this area, I think this is a fresh new area in golf that is being explored. And if we have something like that people can access, they're going to want to embrace that and start to follow it. And if they do, that means that they're going to get better. And if they get better, they're going to want to play golf, and they're going to want to keep playing golf. And that means it's better for golf, and they're going to have a lot more fun at it too. I mean, the bottom line of this whole thing, really, honestly, is to just have more fun. I mean, let's face it. And so many people take the game so seriously, and there are people who are trying to compete and things like that. But the bottom line is, if you compete and you're doing excellent, like you're having a lot more fun because you're winning.
Absolutely, man. We are on the exact same page, my man.
Great. Awesome. Well, Eric, it was an absolute pleasure. And what we always say in parting is do your best to keep it in the short grass until we meet again. And what we've added now is it is all about impact. So make an impact on somebody and make an impact on that ball.
Thanks, Bernie.
All right, take care.
You've been listening to Breaking Par with your host, Bernard Sheridan. Follow us on Twitter @Breaking Par and on Facebook @Par Breakers Golf Academy. Until next week, try to keep it on the short grass.